Seriously, if you don't think this is one of the best automotive designs Volkswagen have ever come up with, you're wrong. It's that simple.
Now, if you've watched any of our videos or done any research about Volkswagens in general, you'll know that they can have some reliability issues. But this car, this is a case where maybe the old stuff is better than the new stuff.
This feels like what Porsche would have built if they built a small front-wheel drive hatchback. It feels that good. Now look, before we get into this, we've got some massive news. You've been asking for it. We're finally doing it. We're having our very first Cars and Coffee. It's going to be on Sunday, December 7th at Shannon's in Artarmon in Sydney. This is a completely free event. Everybody in the general public can come along, and we've already got a bunch of amazing cars already lined up. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and later that night, also at Shannon's in Artarmon, we're having our very first live ticketed event with our good mate and auto expert, John Cadogan.
That's right, we're going to be talking new cars, used cars, the car industry, some behind the scenes stories. There's also going to be a whole Q&A section so we can answer your burning questions.
Now, tickets are limited and selling fast, so click the link below and get yours now.
Don't miss out. Okay, look, I need to come clean with you about something, all right? I personally love these cars. Obviously in this video, we're going to be taking you through, what goes wrong with them, all the pros and cons, and we'll work out if we think you should buy one or not. And I'm going to do my absolute best to remain as unbiased as I can through this video, but I mean, how can you not love this? I mean, look how unique it is. And on the used market, they look like absolute bargains, which is why I've nearly bought one a number of times. But I haven't gone through with it because, and I'll be honest, it pains me to say this, they can have a few concerns. For example, and like so many cars of this era and even newer, if these things aren't cared for, the clear coat on plastic components can wear prematurely. For examples with sunroofs, typical for cars with sunroofs, if they're not cleaned and cleared properly, you can have all sorts of water leakage issues. And like so many European cars, all the plastic components, they can become brittle over time, wear prematurely, and they're going to be bloody expensive to repair. Speaking of water ingress issues, the seals for the tail lights can start to wear by now, and this can let water in. And as we all know, water and electricity sometimes can result in quite the toxic relationship. Speaking of electronic issues, these things can be guilty of a whole host of problems here. You'd like to think that they're pretty much all just irritating and should be pretty affordable and easy to fix, as long as you get to them early. Otherwise, it's a bit of a how long is a piece of string scenario. Just make sure that everything powered by electricity actually works. The powered mirrors, do they adjust properly and do they fold in and out as they should? The headlights, do they flicker or just fail? It might be dodgy bulb connectors. The fuel filler cap, make sure it locks and unlocks. Make sure the alarm works because the control unit under here, it can fail. The rear parking sensors, sometimes just being dirty can make them play up. Sometimes it's a wiring issue. Sometimes it's another water ingress problem. Other times it can just be the control unit on the fritz. These frameless doors, they look sexy as hell, but they can also be responsible for many of these water ingress issues and the resulting electrical problems. For example, these door locks can play up, but to get behind there to fix it often requires the entire door card to come off the door. And that is an absolute prick of a job and can become extremely expensive if you're paying someone else to do it. Also, the windows drop down about 10 mil when you open the door, or at least they should. Some owners have found that that fails to happen. But even when it does work, if it's been a rainy day, water falls in and just drenches your arm and also covers the interior with water. And as we can see here, there's some electronics. But there is a really easy fix for this. There are weather shields that you can buy that just snap on up here and that should solve it. Plus, in really cold climates, sometimes the glass can stick to these rubber strips here and it doesn't drop down like that. But then when you try to open the door, it kind of tears this rubber strip off. It is pretty easily fixed. You just get some rubber lubricant and that should solve the problem. But if water does get into the doors, it can also create a whole bunch of issues with your speakers. And if water gets into the cabin via the sunroof, oh my God, the car can suffer from a whole host of electrical issues on top of this. Like the exterior, just try everything that's powered by electricity. Please make sure it actually works. But it might not just be water-related issues. Like so many European cars of this era, the air conditioning compressors, they can give up the ghost by about now. And also the buttons on the steering wheel and the horn, they can have some issues as well. This is just generally the electronic connector wearing out over time. Oh, also, some of the electronics on the gear selector for the DSG models, they can play up. Sometimes it just won't select a gear or it won't select park. But if you've got one of the models that doesn't have push button start, it means that you won't be able to get your key out of the ignition. Luckily though, this one is a manual transmission because the DSGs can also be guilty of a whole range of mechanical issues. If you're test driving your DSG, just make sure that it doesn't shudder as you pull away and listen for any sort of violent or aggressive clunking or mechanical sounds as it changes gears. Also, Jim, our resident mechanic, he'll unpack all of this sort of stuff later in the video. And then obviously there's the issue that you're going to lose hours of your life just standing around admiring this amazing design. Seriously, if you don't think this is one of the best automotive designs Volkswagen have ever come up with, you're wrong. It's that simple. I just feel like they've almost shrink-wrapped a body over this lean and yet muscular platform. And also, it's the perfect size, and it just has perfect proportions. Actually, I feel like the Volkswagen designers popped over to the Porsche design studio and said, hey guys, do you mind if we just borrow the rear 3/4 panels off a 911 for a little while, until about 2017 when we wrap up production of the Scirocco? Also, if you can spot the visual difference between the pre and post update at purely a glance, we're not sure if that's a good thing. Maybe you should focus on your social life a little bit more because they look near identical. But as hot as these things are to look at, I'm afraid that's not it for common problems, I'm sorry. Plenty of owners have complained that the ABS sensors and the adaptive suspension can have a whole host of electrical gremlins. In fact, many owners recommend that with the adaptive suspension, rather than refitting OEM parts, you might be better off fitting quality aftermarket suspension. With how good quality aftermarket suspension is these days, you can often get better ride and handling out of the aftermarket stuff and save yourself a whole bunch of money. But no matter what suspension the car comes fitted with, you might have to replace the rears anyway, because the rear struts, they're known to leak. Also, the little cup that sort of holds the spring, it can fill with water, but then it starts to corrode the actual spring, and the spring can snap, so you're gonna have to replace it anyway. I should mention, that's not a super common problem, and it's really easy to fix. Also, those in the know highly recommend getting four-wheel wheel alignments more often than not in these, and also spend the money and fit some quality performance rubber as well. Honestly, getting all of that sorted can make or break how these cars drive. Also, if the steering and just the overall handling of the car doesn't feel all that sharp, or you're getting some really weird wear patterns on the tyres, a wheel alignment should be your first port of call. Although, regardless of the alignment settings, if you do drive a Scirocco in the way that the engineers intended, these can have quite the appetite for tyres. Also, updating the bushes can make a massive difference too. From the factory, these were never intended to be as sharp or as dynamic as, say, a Renault Megane RS or a Civic Type R, but fitting some quality aftermarket bushes, my God, you can transform these cars. And then there are just really annoying things. Like, plenty of owners have complained that the wipers can get really noisy, and the OEM blades, as they wear, rather than removing rainwater, they just kind of smear it all over the windscreen. Plus, those OEM replacements are ridiculously expensive. But then if you go for the cheap aftermarket stuff, honestly, they can be utter shit. Instead, hit the Wipertech link down below to get 15% off and free express shipping on the only wiper blades we use, because they are seriously some of the best blades in the business. Check them out, the link's down there. Although, if you're planning on lending into your car, exactly as Ewan has done with his Scirocco here for a ReDriven shoot, don't do any of that, because we're going to give you a set of Wipertech blades for free as a thank you present. My email is down below. Volunteer your car. Another annoying issue is that apparently the tailgate struts can wear prematurely. You know this happens when you're in the boot rummaging around for something and then the tailgate just falls on your head. Good news though, these are so cheap and easy to fix. Also, some owners have complained that on the pre-update models, there's no boot release for the tailgate. Luckily, with the post-update, they fixed this. The update also subtly changed the exterior design, enhanced the features and tech, and internationally updated the 2-litre engine. But not here in Australia. Pre or post facelift, we have this engine. It's actually the same engine that you'll find powering the Mark 6 Volkswagen Golf R. Internationally, this was updated to the same engine that you'll find in the Mark 7 Golf GTi, Golf R, Audi S3, and about 3,000 other Volkswagen models. And not only that, a 1.4-litre turbo and diesel models have also been available internationally too, but again, not here in Australia, although that's no great loss, is it? Also, on some of the pre-update models, they didn't have a rear view camera, but even the models that do have that camera, it's a bit ordinary. In fact, plenty of owners recommend that fitting an aftermarket camera and replacement screen is one of the best mods they've done. Now, that's possibly because plenty of owners have complained just how bad the blind spots are in this car, especially when you're parking it. However, in saying that, other owners have complimented the lack of blind spots. For me, okay, the blind spots, they're not ideal, but it is a sports car, It's kind of what you should expect for this. It's certainly not in, say, the top 10 worst cars I've ever driven in terms of blind spots. In saying that, my daily driver is a Ford Fiesta ST, so it does share a similar kind of overall design to this, so maybe I'm just used to this kind of vision out of it. If you're coming from a 7-seat SUV or a canoe, yeah, the blind spots probably aren't all that good. One of the other advantages of updating the camera and your screen is that it means with a new infotainment system, you can avoid some of the sketchy Bluetooth connection issues that these have. You're going to have faster operation. You'll also end up with the more recent versions of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and even aesthetically, it's just going to freshen up the entire look of the interior. Now, I should mention the post-update models like this, they did update the infotainment systems, and it is substantially better than some of the older, lower spec models. But even then, it's still never going to be as good as the latest, greatest aftermarket tech. Actually, if you want to check out any of this sort of infotainment stuff for your car, or maybe some performance suspension and engine mods, or really whatever accessories you need, simply type in your rego into the Automotive Superstore website and it will display the parts that are going to be best suited to your car. Plus, they ship Australia-wide and they're mates of ours. Check them out. We've added their link down below. But if you do want to retain the whole Volkswagen OEM look, but still get the latest tech and better sounds, you can upgrade these to later model Golf infotainment systems. And the speakers in here, as standard, they're actually pretty good, but as Ewan has found and plenty of other owners have attested to, just fitting an amplifier and a subwoofer can make a massive difference. Actually, you know what? We've made an entire guide to all of this sort of stuff. The link for that video is also down below. Also, while we're in here, plenty of owners have complained that the roof lining can do its best impression of an old Ford Falcon and starts to sag like those sort of jowls you see around old men's necks. And remember, we are talking about a mid-20-teens Volkswagen here, so you can expect a few brittle plastics and some rattles going on. Actually, one owner we spoke to mentioned that while he absolutely adores his car, he does wish that he didn't have to reassemble the entire door plastics every time he shuts it. And also, while it does share plenty with the Golf, it certainly doesn't share the Golf's levels of interior practicality. It's not too bad, but a few owners have complained about this. You do have a storage cubby hole here. You've got a couple of cup holders and they will hold a small pretentious coffee like an oat piccolo. Under the armrest, you've got storage here specifically for your extra mint, and also this is perfectly sized to hold your phone. That's fantastic. Love that. Glove box is pretty small. Spot for your sunglasses up there. The door bins, not a very good size, plus they're very shallow. It's good that they're felt lined, so nothing's going to rattle around, but you're not probably going to put anything in there. You've got more storage here, but again, not lined, so it's going to rattle around. No storage under the seats. Look, it's not a practical hatchback. It's supposed to be kind of a sporty coupe. I think the practicality is okay for what the car is. But let's focus on more positives. These seats and the seating position. Okay, the seats. These are about as close to perfect as it gets. They're pretty much the same seats that you'll find in a TTRS and an RS4 of the time. And you might think they're going to be uncomfortable because they're so aggressively bolstered, but they're not. You can spend hours in these things and never get a numb bum. And then the seating position. There's little things I love. This is a typical Volkswagen thing. But not only is there a footrest for your left foot, there's also a footrest for your right foot when you've got the cruise control on. Plus, despite the aggressive bolsters, plenty of owners have actually complimented how resilient these interiors are. And even in this car, like the bolsters still feel super strong. The steering wheel's getting a little bit smooth, that's to be expected, but overall, really good resilience. Even the distance between the steering wheel and the gear selector, look at that. That is perfect. Spot on for ergonomics. And also, look, we'll get into what these cost later in the video, but this feels far more premium than what you're expecting for what these cost. Also, I love like the OEM gauge cluster up there. It just looks a bit more special. And a few owners we spoke to that have owned a range of different Volkswagen models, they consider this to be sort of peak Volkswagen build quality. And I got to admit, the fit and finish, like, you've got a few little creaks and whatnot here and there, but overall, really good. Maybe I'm just biased though. Now, just getting in the backseat of this, it's a bit like going to the gym. You don't want to do it from the start. It's challenging while you're midway through, but once you're done, it's quite rewarding. Anyway, in the backseat of this thing, I'm exactly 15 centimeters taller than the star of the classic movie Scirocco, Humphrey Bogart. This is in my driving position, and it's really interesting. So I've got a decent amount of footroom. Leg room isn't too bad either. Like, my knees are kind of banging up against the back of the seat, but I am quite tall. My head just cannot get comfortable though. I'm just like, I can feel the top of my head just constantly just flirting with the underside of the roof. The windows are really small, so it does feel claustrophobic, and also the dark surround doesn't help that at all. The seats themselves, pretty comfortable. It's interesting, you can tell the back seats weren't a priority in the design process, but they're doing their best to make it an enjoyable place once you're back here. Then as far as features and practicality, you know, it's not actually too bad. I thought this was going to be a pointless little cubby bin here, but it actually holds your phone quite well. There's little cubby storage bins on the side, but they've got a good depth to them, and they're felt lined, so nothing really rattles around too much. There are no cup holders back here. There's obviously no pull down armrest. It's okay. And then we come to the reason that I haven't bought a Scirocco, and it's this bloody opening boot aperture. The boot itself isn't too bad. There's a good amount of space in here, although the load lip is enormous. And it's bloody frustrating that the seats, they don't fold flat. You've always got this load lip here. But this boot aperture is just honestly too small. There are too many real life scenarios where this is going to be an absolute pain in the ass. Now look, we need to say a massive thank you to you for watching this video and hopefully watching other ReDriven videos. But if you'd like to help us make more free content for you, simply hit that subscribe button down below. Honestly, it helps us more than you know, and we'd be so appreciative. Plus, if you'd like even more ReDriven perks, why not join our membership program? The link for that is down below. Some of the perks are that you get to find out what cars we're filming before we film them, and you can ask questions about those cars and we'll hopefully answer them in the video. For example, physics operator wants to know why these things sound like shit, but I disagree, they don't. Sounds great. But look, you know what I love about these things, aside from the looks and just the general vibe? It's the way they bloody drive. I mean, for what these cost, there are very few other cars that absolutely nail this balance between being a genuine daily driving option while still being a proper driver's car. Except for one small annoying trait, which is this steering, typical for Volkswagen. It just, look, it doesn't feel as dead and soulless as plenty of other ones, but God, if the steering was on point, this would be a spectacular car. Plus, as Ewan has proven with this actual car, a few simple mods, oh my God, they can go such a long way. Basically, this thing has a short shift kit, some really intelligent suspension mods, some massaging of the engine, just subtle, and some clutch modifications as well. And seriously, what a thing. Those subtle little changes, and it's just, the car's astoundingly good now. And look, even standard, these things are more than fast enough for public roads, but with this little massage to the ECU and the breathing of the engine, it's now in that lovely little zone where you need to have really good throttle modulation, otherwise the front of the car kind of has a tantrum, but that's half the fun. And look, there are plenty of complaints online that these things should have been all-wheel drive from the factory. I don't know about that. Like, sure, it would have been a lot faster in terms of initial acceleration, but let's be honest, straight line acceleration gets bloody boring really, really fast. And I've always found that front wheel drive Golf GTIs are always more fun than their all-wheel drive Golf R counterparts. And this is basically a smaller, lighter Golf GTI. It's just a recipe for brilliance. And look, okay, I might be biased again here, but I just feel like every Scirocco I've driven, standard or, you know, really well modified like this, they just feel so sorted. This one especially, there are no rattles. For the normal daily driving stuff, it's fantastic because it's small, it's easy to park. When the suspension's in comfort mode, it is genuinely comfortable. The turning circle is fantastic. This gear shift, oh my God, forget DSG. You want a manual and you want this with the short shifter. It is fantastic. If I was to be really picky, at normal speeds, it does sort of feel like a nice Golf. I just wish it felt a little bit more special more of the time. But about the biggest compliment I can give it is that it just feels tens of thousands of dollars more expensive than what it is. It sort of feels like, hang on a sec. Oh. Yes. Okay, this is the biggest compliment I can give this car. This feels like what Porsche would have built if they built a small front-wheel drive hatchback. It feels that good. That is, as long as it has a manual gearbox, because the DSG issues, yeah, they are a thing, as are some other mechanical concerns. But I tell you what, I can't tell you about any of that because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But luckily, Jim is.
Now, the Australian versions of these had the EA113, which is a way more simplified engine, but also somewhat more reliable. Now these engines have a timing belt, not a timing chain like the later versions. Now that timing belt is due every 105,000 Ks or every 7 years. Now that timing belt drives the water pump. This is that water pump. Now fun fact about that water pump, of course you would change it when you do the timing belt, but that water pump is about $200 worth. Now that's a very different story to this water pump. Now this water pump is about, I don't know, about $1,000 worth, which is on the EA 888 on the later generations. See where I'm going here? Old stuff is better than the new stuff. Now I should mention some of the overseas markets did get the EA 888 engine. Some say it's a better engine, but it's more complicated and more does go wrong. So yeah, sucks for them. The EA 113 isn't without its problems though. The early versions of it were known for a problem with their fuel pump and the cam follower. That just basically wears out and disintegrates over time. You will get some air-fuel ratio fault codes and some fuel pressure fault codes when you have a problem there. But it does pay to periodically check it and just maybe replace it before it fails. Now the turbocharger on these, it is pretty good, but the diverter valve, it can be somewhat problematic. It just basically regulates boost. It fails sometimes, and you will nearly always get a boost regulation fault code telling you when you have an issue, and the good news here is it's actually pretty cheap and easy to replace too. And typically, like a lot of other Volkswagens, they have PCV issues as well. Sometimes you'll get some air-fuel ratio fault codes, sometimes you get a misfire. Sometimes you'll hear a weird humming noise coming from your engine. Now, if that noise stops when you take the dipstick out, you definitely know you've got a PCV issue. And again, that's not really that difficult or expensive to fix. So yeah, overall, they are a pretty good engine and they respond pretty well to some modifications and some higher boost. They go pretty well, but just make sure you modify it within your budget, because if you lean on it too hard, it will pretty much break in half. Now, as Adam alluded to, the DSG transmission in these, they can be somewhat problematic. Yes, they're clunky and jerky and just a little bit angry all around, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with them. When something does go wrong, now you have problems with the accumulators, the clutches, the mechatronics unit. When they start to fail, you can have no shifting, no gears, nothing at all basically in some cases, and you can also have some electronics issues as well. Now typically you'll get a fault code telling you what's going on, or you'll just not be going anywhere. Yeah, look, some of those issues can be expensive, so something to keep in mind. Now servicing every 60,000 kilometers does help, but keep in mind, even when they're serviced, that doesn't mean you're not going to have these issues. A better way to not have those issues is just get the manual, if you can drive a manual. They are actually pretty robust. Sometimes the dual mass flywheel can be problematic, and sometimes the clutch can wear as well, but sometimes that's just operator abuse, but overall the manual is a way better option.
This is where the Scirocco becomes really seriously tempting. The cheapest examples on the Aussie used market at the moment are asking less than $10,000. At the other end of the spectrum, like concourse condition, mint condition examples, a little bit under $40,000. That is so much car for the money, especially when you compare it to its homegrown competition. See, a Mark 6 or Mark 7 Golf GTi or R can ask anywhere from 10 to 20% more than an equivalent Scirocco. And okay, sure, they're more practical, but one of the Scirocco's greatest assets is that it isn't a Golf. Because in the world of performance cars, the hot Golf models have become some of the most popular tuning platforms. And this means more and more can become victims of poor modifications and just shitty driving. And it appears that most Sciroccos on the used market seem to have avoided this fate so far. You could also explore the possibility of alternatives like the Renault Megane RS, Audi TT, Toyo Baru BR86Z GT, and Civic Type R. Even a Fiesta ST or a Swift Sport might tickle your fancy. But we think as a package, the Scirocco is bloody hard to beat. And look, obviously, these aren't perfect, but if you're willing to put in the time and effort and finances, and you find an example that passes a pre-purchase inspection with flying colours, and it's a manual, it's a yes from us. Obviously that excludes anyone that can't drive a manual because of medical reasons, but otherwise, learn to drive a manual, especially in one of these, it's totally worth it. Although in saying that, regardless of the transmission, these are also seriously worth a look. It can also create a whole bunch of issues with
is due every 105,000 Ks or every 7 years. Sorry, do it again. Had some food.
It's a bit like going to the gym. You don't want to do it from the start. While you're there, it's not that hard, brain. Just say the words.